So thank you for confirmation that the live stream has started. Before we formally start the meeting, I'll go to each councillor present in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for virtual meetings. Where practicable, please also have your switched on so that you can be seen by those in attendance and the public watching. So first of all, I begin with Cabinet members. Councillor Felicity Norman.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Ellie Chowns.
Thanks, Leader. I can hear and see you.
Councillor Pauline Crockett.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Gemma Davis.
Good evening, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor John Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Liz Harvey.
Yes, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. And Councillor Ange Tyler.
Yes, good evening, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor support members, Councillor Jenny Bartlett.
Good evening, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor John Hardwick.
Good evening, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Peter Ginman.
Yes, good evening, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. And Councillor Alan Selden sends his apologies. Group leaders, Councillor Terry James.
Can I just... Oh, sorry.
Carry on.
Yep, Councillor Terry James.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Jonathan Lester.
Good evening. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Bob Matthews.
Yes, can see and hear you, Leader.
Councillor Tony Fagan, who is substituting.
Evening, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor William Wilding, who is also substituting.
Good evening. Yep, I can see and hear.
Thank you. And scrutiny chairs, Councillor Carol Gandy.
Good evening, Leader. I can see and hear you.
And Councillor Alyssa Swinglehurst.
Good evening, Leader. I can hear and see you.
Okay. It says check for any others in attendance, such as vice chairs, substitutions. I think we have those.
Leader, I'm substituting for Councillor Selden.
That's what I meant to say. Thank you.
Councillor Bowers, thank you. Right. So we also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they are called upon. Thank you. I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making an official recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, as we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group members or their representatives in turn to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. If any attendee loses connection, and it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of Cabinet members remains able to hear the proceedings and be heard. Voting will be undertaken electronically using the voting software within the virtual meeting platform. Only Cabinet members may vote. In the event that electronic voting is not possible to use, or there is a technical failure, I will ask each Cabinet member by means of a roll call to indicate if they are for, against, or are abstaining. The results of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes of the meeting where there is a requirement to do so. If a Cabinet member has not been present for the whole of a discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Just a word of explanation. We've moved the agenda around. So we start off with the council tax reduction scheme, and then go to the capital budget, and the income, and then we end up with the housing item. So my apologies for moving things around. There are a number of reasons for that. First of all, I really don't want the meeting to drag on. I think if we end up meeting beyond 8 o'clock, I think people's attention levels will be low. We do have less on the agenda going forward the next couple of months. And so the market position statement can be moved to another meeting when hopefully we can deal with it with more attention than we might at the end of this meeting. So my apologies for any of the officers and cabinet members and anybody else who's inconvenienced by that. So I will then go on to trying to find the right screen. Sorry about this. Right, here we are. The screen had disappeared. Sorry about that. Or at least it's usually the operator who's at fault. So my apologies for that. So first of all, items for apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Selden. I think that's all. Clark, is there anybody else who has sent apologies?
No, Leader. All the cabinet members are present, and I've no further apologies from those you already noted.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Yes, I need to declare an interest in item 9, the capital programme, as I'm a trustee of the Leominster Area Regeneration Company, which manages Grange Court.
Good, thank you for mentioning that. Any others? Those will be recorded in the minutes, I imagine. Item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting held on 17th of December 2020. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, so I will ask cabinet members to confirm that they agree the minutes by an electronic vote. Non-voting attendees will be moved to a breakout room for a few moments. They will be automatically returned to the main room when all eligible votes have been cast. Please can non-voting attendees be moved out, which has happened already. The voting screen will come up.
Leader, we have 8 voting members and they may vote now.
Thank you.
And those have been unanimously accepted, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we'll move to questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We received 3 questions for this meeting and responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted questions have been given the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to send an audio or video recording or to join the meeting to ask their question live. I will now ask the clerk to confirm how many supplemental questions have been received, and I'll go questioner by questioner. First of all, Ms. Bradbury.
Yeah, Ms. Bradbury does not have a supplementary question, Leader.
Thank you. Mr. Pincham.
Mr. Pincham has a written supplementary question, and I'll bring that up on screen and read it on his behalf. So Mr. Pincham asks that the previous Conservative administration committed to maintaining a 4-sided ground should the council proceed with any redevelopment. Will the cabinet member today reaffirm this commitment to the many bulls extremely worried at the prospect of Hereford FC losing the required ground standards needed to return to professional football in League Two? Noting the council wants 115 units located on Blackfriars Street, will the cabinet member also personally commit to learning from the development at Leyton Orient FC, which saw the development of a 116 unit affordable housing development and a 1,300 seat stand?
Councillor Chowns, I think this is your portfolio.
It is, yes. And thank you, Mr. Pinchin, for your question. And I'll be very happy to provide you with a more detailed written response. But just in terms of reassurance, as the mother of a semi-pro footballer, I'm very keen on supporting football, and I'm really keen to look into whatever we can do to support the club. I wasn't aware of Leyton Orient example, and I will absolutely commit to looking into that as well.
Councillor Chowns, the last little bit was muffled. I wonder whether, I think you were saying you weren't aware of Leyton Orient's developments, but you would perhaps follow up on that to find out a bit more.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise the sound went. Yes, no, I'll look into that, absolutely.
Thank you very much. The next supplemental question.
Yes, that was from Ms. Albright, leader, and again, she submitted a written supplementary question here. She says, thank you for your detailed response. I'm reassured by your commitment to both rural affordable housing and self or custom build. However, my question specifically relates to affordable self-build opportunities that are not linked to RPs, housing associations, land trusts, or council-owned land. In other words, self-build projects that are facilitated and paid for by families and individuals, but where the home is protected as affordable in perpetuity by discounted end value, local occupancy restrictions, and possibly size limitations. Are Herefordshire Council able to confirm that they are open to the concept of a specific affordable self-build policy that can be delivered by individuals in rural communities without an HA, CLT or council land? I would be very happy to share my experience of affordable self-build to help shape a policy for Herefordshire if needed, and hopefully enable many more local people to build their own home and strengthen our fabulous rural communities.
There's another question for someone who knows their subject inside out, and we do appreciate support from people who can add extra to us. So Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Ms. Albright, for your further question. We've had a look at the Shropshire policy, like you mentioned, in terms of people building their own houses. The council has been doing this over the last 15 years with their self-build and custom build details. So I don't see whether we'd be averse not to be considering this sort of type of building, but it would be up to the housing need in any areas in the rural communities where we would have to consider whether this is a viable case to build in the open countryside. So we will sort of like look into this anyway, and perhaps follow up with a further written response to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we now move on to the first item, the substantive item. I'm sorry, item 5 is actually to receive any questions from councillors, but we don't have any questions from councillors. So I will move on to the next item, which this evening is going to start off with the council tax reduction scheme. And this is to recommend to council the 2021-22 local council tax reduction scheme. This begins on page 77 of the agenda pack. And I'll pass over to my colleague, Councillor Harvey, Cabinet Member, Finance and Corporate Services, to lead on this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leader. It's my pleasure to introduce this agenda item on the 2021-22 Council Tax Reduction Scheme. The recommendation is that the Council Tax Reduction Scheme for 2021-22, with increased discounts compared to the existing scheme, be recommended to Council for approval. The existing local council tax scheme for working age claimants was approved by this council back in December 2015 and has been implemented every year since then as part of this council setting its budget. The scheme provides a discount varying between 80% and 84% on the amount of council tax payable. Since 2015, this discount has been restricted to properties with a Band C equivalent rating. And pensioner council tax reduction is something that's set nationally, and those who qualify to receive it have a 100% discount on their council tax. More than 11,000 bill payers in Herefordshire are in receipt of council tax reduction, with over 6,000 of those claims coming from working age householders. As an administration, we're concerned to make improved provision for the many households who are facing considerable financial hardship as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. And it's proposed this year that the working age scheme is amended to also provide a 100% discount unless household income breaches the required threshold. And that's irrespective of the council tax banding of the house. So this means that there will be no council tax band restriction and no liability reduction. The draft scheme is attached for colleagues to consider at Appendix A to the agenda paper for this report. Under the present scheme, nearly £12 million of council tax discount is provided to households each year, and the level of discount is expected under the proposed 2021 scheme to be a little over 14 million. The reduction in council tax collected as a result of this discount increase is expected to be around 1.9 million, and it's proposed that this reduction is funded by utilising one-off funding that the council receives, 800,000 of which this coming year will come from the 2021 New Homes Bonus allocation, and 1.1 million from the local council tax support grant that we received that was announced in the draft local government financial settlement. Local consultation with parish and town councils and businesses and organisations was undertaken on this budget, and over 70% of the responses we received indicated that people wanted to see an increase in support to local households facing financial difficulty. So this paper sets out how we plan to do it, and I hope that that colleagues will support this as an addition to the overall financial package for the budget for this year.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, any questions, clarification or comments from any Cabinet members? Go to the participant list. I think you've highlighted, Councillor Harvey, the most important changes. There's quite a substantial extra amount of money which we're anticipating might be required to help households that can't afford or are struggling with the 4.99% increase. So I think that's the principal change with this document, and it's not an insubstantial one. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it is a hard time for a lot of people. So I was just wondering, within the scheme, is there a mechanism whereby when people do apply or are identified for help, that they can also get additional signposting to other services so that we have a much more joined up approach?
Councillor Harvey,
Well, it's my understanding that the team that administered this as a scheme are also involved in providing advice on revenue and benefits and other forms of help. So it would certainly be possible for people to access other sorts of advice and support, and I would encourage people to do so. It is a really difficult and extremely stressful time at the moment, and families are going through all sorts of difficult circumstances, and many for the first time. And if the council's able to help signpost to advice and support, then I'm sure we want to help to do so.
We have Mr. Lovegrove and Mrs. Rushgrove here. I don't know whether either of you wanted to comment on accessibility, what we've got on our website and that kind of thing.
Leader, I'm very happy to provide further information. As Councillor Harvey has said, that the team make sure that people are aware of all the other support mechanisms that are within the county, and we also work very closely with all of the organisations that work with people and advocates for them. So Citizens Advice, we have various charities and organisations that work with former service personnel, so we don't have a wrong front door as soon as anybody makes contact. And we also have relationships with those organisations, so if somebody approaches Citizens Advice or one of these other advocate agencies, they have a fast track route into making sure that they speak to the right person in the team as well. So yes, we do try and do our best to make sure that wherever somebody makes contact with the system, we do their best to help them with the council tax reduction scheme. Maybe they qualify for discretionary housing payment, of course, and other benefits that other people help them with.
Thank you, Mr. Lovegrove. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Harvey, for introducing a really difficult subject quite easy. So fully supportive of what we're proposing here. It focuses the support that we've got on the people that are being impacted the most by the severe consequences of COVID. And I don't think any of us have got any idea at the moment how big those consequences are going to be, but if we can provide some kind of support to help people through what's going to be a difficult few years, then you've got my full support. I'm particularly happy to see, in conjunction with the increase to that council tax support, the 100% support for foster carers as well, which is closely linked to another agenda item coming up, and I see this as integral for us to be able to attract the numbers that we're looking for foster carers.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And absolutely, that is one point I was going to make, and to say how much I welcome that. And we hope very much it'll be part of what we're doing to encourage and support, the increase in the number of foster carers. And I just also wanted to flag up, I'm sure we're all very much aware of the increasing numbers of children on free school meals. And it's it's an increasingly concerning picture. I think in October we decided there were at least 25% more children on free school meals than there had been just a year ago, and it will almost certainly be a lot more than that now. And I think other people have mentioned that it's actually these are people who've probably never been out of work, some of them, and are facing this sort of difficulty for the first time. So it is an enormous problem for all of us, and I'm very glad we can help in this way.
Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. I fully support this agenda item. These are very difficult times for many people, and the reduction scheme acknowledges our understanding of these difficulties. I was going to say about the carers, foster carers allowance, but it's already been said. So yes, fully support it.
And Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just echoing the Councillor Davis's comments. Really, we realise that there's a lot of residents in Herefordshire that will be struggling over the next 12 to 18 months, and anything we can do to support them through these financial stressful time is paramount that we do that as a council. I would also like to mention that I think we need to do some comms around this as well to get as much communication out to residents, so that they can link to the council website to ensure that they can access relevant information as and when at the time it arises. But I just hope that we can help where we can at such a poignant time for families struggling. Thank you.
Councillor Jimman.
Yes, thank you. Just point out in the public papers on this, part of the appendix, part of the index says error in it in various places. Can we just make sure that it is corrected in the final version? The second is that this is an incredibly complex document when you start to read the detail. So I do thank very much Mr. Lovegrove for his comments about having people available to assist. I was talking to Citizens Advice Bureau member only yesterday, and they were saying that they are getting a lot of inquiries. A lot of their inquiries at the moment are about payments of rent and the inabilities to cope. And I think this is very timely that we make sure that this document is in place, but it does need, as just has been said, adequate communication and explanation. And to that end, may I just check what is the definition? It's for the purposes of this. It says any earnings of a child or a young person are not taken into account. Am I right in thinking a young person ceases to be such at 16, or is there any other definition that applies? Page 195 of the paper.
Mr. Lovegrove, are you able to respond?
Joseph Rescott, are you able to answer that? I think it is.
It does depend on the situation of the child as they reach adulthood, whether they stay in full-time education or not. So it's like you can match it to when their entitlement to child benefit ceases. That is when they cease to be a child.
I think that highlights the complexity of understanding of some of this, and grateful for the comment. But as I say, it emphasizes the need for explanation.
Yes, we're going to have more questions, I'm sure, relating to this. This has been to Scrutiny Committee. So, Councillor Lester, do you want 2 bites of the cherry or one? Are you going to deal with as scrutiny and then as leader or Conservatives? Or
well, just to make the initial point from the Conservative group, obviously, if we were in your shoes, we would be considering what we would be doing in the face of the challenges that council taxpayers face. And I think it's safe to say we'd be doing the same thing. We think this is right. We think it's right to review the way that the cap is on banding. And so therefore, it's good that we've received this money from local government, from central government, to allow us to provide this change this year. It's very timely, and I'm sure people will really appreciate it. I think it will have to be reviewed in times to come, but you know, as far as it's being put forward at this current moment in time, we as a group would support it.
Okay, the Scrutiny Committee Chair, I don't know whether
we reviewed the budget. Forgive me, I don't think I comment on this part of the meeting.
Yes, I'm not sure there are any recommendations or anything attached to this report. So yeah. Okay, thank you. Then I'll go on to Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Leader. We warmly welcome the proposed extension of the scheme, especially in these really difficult times. Particularly pleased that the banding restriction has been removed, so we're fully supportive. Thank you.
Okay, just to give people notice, I'm Councillor Bowes, then Councillor James, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Fagan and Councillor Wilding. I'm doing it that order, so you have notice of when you're coming up. So Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. I wholeheartedly welcome this. My only concerns are two concerns. One is budgetary, which comes later. You know, we're entering some pretty difficult and unforecastable times, and I just wonder whether we have sufficient financial finances allocated in order to, if there is a substantial increase in the number of people, which I fear may happen, that we have sufficient funds. Where does the government then, where are we as far as increased government funding in order to produce that? And the other is the concern about those people that just miss getting in within the eligibility for this particular scheme. They're the ones probably going to feel the greatest pressure in the coming months and years. And it's not going to end this year, this coming year. I think we will have 2 or 3 years of problems, I think, as far as this issue is concerned.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Leader. What concerns us, Leader, is that debt recovery cost, in my humble opinion, I agree with the principle of the scheme. We've got to help those that are in the most need of assistance. But what concerns me, Leader, is that the debt recovery costs will soar because of the heavy burden being placed on the taxpayer, with all our services cost being raised, and the council tax of 4.9. And as Councillor James said, it's just those under the band that just over the band that will really find it hard. So can I ask Councillor Harvey, does she anticipate that there could be quite a debt recovery cost because of the impact it'll have on people because of the heavy burden they're going to face?
Councillor Harvey, I don't know whether you want to deal with that now or the general discussion later.
Well, I'll deal with it now in case it addresses questions yet unasked. We're in uncharted territory here, obviously. But in addition to the council tax reduction scheme, we do also have a local assistance fund, exactly for the purpose of assisting people who fall just the other side of the line. So there is scope for providing assistance to people who face hardship but are not qualified specifically for this scheme. So we're doing what we can to create some flexibility there in being able to help people according to their particular circumstances.
Councillor Harvey, is there a tremendous cost to recovery of debts like this? Is it quite a costly affair to know offhand?
Well, this isn't recovery of debt. This is a discount where people are have their council tax payments waived, so they don't incur that debt.
But what I meant, Councillor Hardy, if they do incur that debt, is there quite a cost in recovery?
Well, the council always incurs a degree of cost associated with chasing people who fail to make their payments. How those costs are going to be impacted by the circumstances increasing numbers of people are facing as a consequence of COVID, where we're monitoring as we go. But as I said, we're in uncharted territory. I don't anticipate that on a case-by-case basis it will cost more than it usually does, but there may be more people who are getting into problems, which is one of the reasons why we've extended these schemes to try and prevent people from getting into difficulty in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Councillor Fagan.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we really welcome this, the extension of the scheme in these extraordinary times when people are struggling enormously. And I think it just shows that, while it costs money to look after people, the cost of not looking after people is even greater. So we welcome this.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilding. Councillor Wilding. Oh, you're on mute, Councillor Wilding.
Thanks. The bar wasn't working there. Yeah, we fully support this. I was just going to echo what Councillor Tyler said about making sure people are fully aware how they go about getting this and when they qualify, and also hope that it can be made simpler in some way. I note what was said about officers being able to lead people through it, but to me it looks very complicated, so I'm sure it would help if it was made simpler in some way. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any card? There was a question really, I think, from Councillor James about what if the situation is much worse, and what if people are just, I think we've dealt with the issue about people who are just below eligibility. There is a bit of a safety net there, but I guess we don't, you know, if it gets worse. Sorry, Councillor Lester.
Yes, sorry, thank you. It was just reference to the scrutiny committee's comment on this that is actually noted in a further item, agenda item on the budget. But the question that was just raised, which you've obviously taken into consideration, but if we can just highlight what the scrutiny's point was that is the money going to be set aside and going to be enough to cope with the requirements? So I suppose that's a question to Mr. Lovegrove. That's what the scrutiny committee were most concerned about.
Yeah. Do you want to comment on that first of all, Councillor Harvey?
Well, it's a little bit, how long is a piece of string? We've added another £800,000 to the 1.1 million that came from central government as an added precaution, and I think that addition was supported in terms of using some of the one-off funding that we got going through the scrutiny process on the budget. I think if we find ourselves in a significantly worse situation and the amount of funding that we've made available for this proves to be inadequate, everybody else will be in the same boat, and we will join everybody in making a case to central government and trying to work out what it is we do about it. But I think from my point of view, and I'll defer to Mr. Lovegrove in a moment, but I think by putting additional funding in at the front end here now, I think we've shown that we're giving it due consideration, that we are sort of adding to the fund that central government have provided. So when it comes to making a case, if we do find we need to ask for more, I think we will have shown that we've done our very best in making local provision in advance.
Thank you. Mr. Lovegrove, do you wish to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Leader. And as Councillor Harvey said, we don't know with complete certainty how much this scheme will be taken up. And at one level, I think we'd all agree that we'd prefer it wasn't taken up at all, where people's house incomes maintained. In terms of the is it enough, I think the paper explains the rationale for how we've arrived at the numbers. And as Councillor Harvey has said, that I think this council is on the front foot with this by adding extra money in. We do keep a regular exchange with government, MHCLG. We provide, it's now amounting to a monthly update on our financial position with other councils, and this is part of the forecasting that we're providing. So government will be aware of how this pans out into the future, and certainly we'll be keeping Cabinet abreast as through our normal budget monitoring.
Perhaps I can make a couple of observations. I think through the COVID crisis, the government has been providing money to us, as we may well discuss later on this evening. So it's, as Councillor Harvey said, we can, if we have issues, we will hope that central government will help. And if we end up approving a 4.99% increase in the council tax, I wouldn't like to be in a position like some other authorities who might be going for less than that, because they will be told, well, you didn't raise the amount which you could have done. So that's another reason perhaps supporting our idea of suggesting a particular rise in council tax, for some of which we are using to help people who are in straitened circumstances. So I think I will put this to the vote. The recommendation. So the recommendation is that the council tax reduction scheme for 2021-22 with increased discounts compared to the existing scheme be recommended to council for approval. So if I could ask the clerk to, so I will ask cabinet members to vote on the recommendation. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed. I have a screen that's come up which talks about, thank you, Jenny. Yeah. So the voting screen could be brought up, please.
Leader, we've got 8 voting members and they may cast their vote now.
Thank you.
And those have been unanimously accepted, Leader.
Thank you. So if we could have the non-voting members back in the room. Right, so the next item is the 2021-22 capital investment budget and capital strategy update. And the purpose of this is to recommend to...
Leader, I believe I have to leave. Can somebody remove me, please? So the purpose is to recommend to council the capital investment budget and capital strategy for 2021-22. This begins on page 219 of the agenda pack. And the introduction from Councillor Harvey, the Cabinet Member Finance and Corporate Services. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Leader. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce this item on the capital investment budget and capital strategy update. There are 2 recommendations here. It's recommended to be recommended to council that it approves the proposed capital programme for 2021-22, which is attached to this report at Appendix C, and that it approves the capital strategy document, which is appended at Appendix D. The current approved capital programme and forecast outturn is provided at Appendix B. Since the approval of the programme back in February 2020, an additional 13.59 million has been added to the capital programme, and the details of these additions can be found at paragraph 5 in the report. Appendix A provides details of the proposed additions to the existing capital programme that have been identified and the impact of approving these additions. 11 capital investment budget proposals totaling 20.7 million have been identified to be funded by capital grants, redirected funding from revenue reserves, returns on capital investment, leaving less than a quarter of the overall investment needing to come from prudential borrowing at around 4.8 million. A review's been carried out to ensure that all new funding requests proposed were manageable within the current borrowing limits in the existing medium-term financial strategy, and we continue to retain £10.6 million of unallocated capital receipts in our reserve. This administration intends to address the shortfall in affordable homes in the county by funding the development of at least 2,500 new homes over the next 10 years. The rental income generated by these new council-owned homes will cover the cost of their management and the servicing of the £100 million investment necessary to see them built. It's also proposed to split the current development and regeneration partnership investment line to make explicit its separate investment activities in bringing forward economic development and housing projects, including the reuse of publicly owned land assets. The two investment lines in the current programme relating to rebalancing investment and economic development across our market towns are combined to provide an overall planned investment of nearly £21 million. The work has already commenced in partnership with market town stakeholders, using expert regeneration consultants to provide detailed business cases for these development projects. The Council's capital investment plans are the foundations for service transformation and the springboard for sustainable economic development and growth. Delivering to time and budget on these plans is key to achieving our ambitions for Herefordshire. Consequently, I'm pleased to draw colleagues' attention to paragraph 35 of the report, where it's highlighted that over the last 18 months, we've introduced a detailed and robust approach to project and programme management, and we're undertaking a view of the inherited capital projects to ensure their deliverability, viability and value for money in the very different economic conditions in which we all find ourselves. I draw colleagues' attention to the feedback received from members of the public and stakeholders during the consultation process on this year's budget and capital programme, and in particular, the top priority given to us achieving social value alongside value for money, investing in giving our children a good start in life and in accelerating the delivery of more affordable homes for local people. This capital programme will do these things. I'd like to thank the scrutiny chairs and the members of all three committees for their consideration and support given to this capital programme during the review process. Thank you very much.
So over to Cabinet. Any questions or comments you have? I noted towards the beginning of the report the extraordinary number of projects and the capital that's come into the programme in the current year. In a year when we face floods and we have the COVID issue, we've had an extraordinary number of pots of money coming forward, and that's involved extra work for council officers. So I really appreciate all the work they've done, either to secure those funds and to then spend them. So I do appreciate your work in doing that. Any comments, Councillor Davis?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Just a quick question. We talk about equality impact assessments at, I think it's page 223, and it says that an EIA will be carried out prior to any new scheme commencing. Can I have clarification on that will be done before any of the actual plans are built up? Because historically what we've had is people doing EIAs, equality impact assessments, after plans have already been made, which haven't taken into consideration those protected characteristics.
Well, I'd certainly be wanting the project planning process to be including looking at equality and equality impacts at the earliest stage.
I wonder, just so that I was just thinking whether or not I needed to say if that needed to be amended, but I think that I can take it from your statement and from the nod from Andrew Lovegrove that is the case, that it will be done prior to any plans being made up. So I'm happy with that.
Could I perhaps ask Mr. Lovegrove to explain to me clause 6 or paragraph 6, because I got a little bit confused with the figures there, and I'm just a bit concerned that some might read it and think there's some jiggery pokery going on there. I think my confusion is that it's if I think of capital the same as cash, then that's a big mistake. This is about projects which we've committed to, but somehow 2.5 million appears to come from from the LEP. Councillor Lovegrove, are you able to enlighten the Cabinet about paragraph 6?
Leader, yes, I'm happy to. And can I ask Karen Morris, the Strategic Capital Accountant, to take us through that detail, if that's okay?
Yeah, those are the, so what we've done is we tried to identify the changes in the capital programme that were approved at Council in February 2020, and the changes to the capital programme have involved a change in borrowing requirements. So as you'll remember at previous council meetings, we've added in projects such as floods, the leisure centre and insured works. So that has increased the borrowing requirement at the time. And then we've also had a LEP grant in for the Hereford City Centre improvement, which then reduced our overall borrowing requirement. So it's just to be upfront about the movement in the borrowing requirement in the year.
So the money from the LEP hasn't actually been used to spend on those items, it's just been used to offset the, well, to reduce the amount we have to borrow.
Yeah, so the project did increase actually from the original 5.5 to 6 million in the capital programme, but yes, it reduced our borrowing requirement. So it's just the funding of all those projects.
Thank you. Any other comments at this stage from anybody? I don't see any, so I think we'll move on to, I think first of all, the scrutiny chair. So I think it's been to 3 scrutiny committee meetings because it has a bearing on the 3 different scrutiny. So first of all, perhaps I'll start with Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. As it happens, the Adults and Wellbeing Scrutiny was looking at the revenue budget, not the capital budget, because just the way that the projects are falling not within this year's budget. So we have a comment on the capital budget, but we will have a comment on the revenue budget if that's all right.
Yes, fine, thank you. Councillor Gandy, any comments on this stage? Or
we did look at the capital budget and we were very pleased with what we saw. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Lester?
We will have comments to make about the revenue.
Okay. Councillor Lester, I don't know whether you want to comment. As
yes, just briefly, it's in the report reflects the fact that the scrutiny committee were in agreement with the capital projects that have been put forward. But one comment that was made, and forgive me, I can't recall at this very moment which scrutiny committee member it was, but the issue about the Shire Hall improvements was raised, and it was a point about, because there was, that the sum that's required to make the building fit for purpose was quite considerable. There was the suggestion that other uses be explored, given the cost of renovation. And I don't, forgive me, but I don't think that's been picked up as one of the recommendations that have come through to the report where they list all of the recommendations from scrutiny. So that's just a question I have for officers. But I think it was just the scrutiny committee making the point that, because the costs are so extensive, can other avenues be explored to, look at the costing? And I think Councillor Davis was there at the point of that meeting. You had to leave later on, but you were there at the point of at that meeting. So I just flagged that up from a scrutiny perspective.
Councillor Lester, I think that's referred to in the recommendations to the revenue element, which we'll come on to next. So I think the point has been taken into account, but perhaps in the wrong report. So if I can then move on to group leaders in that role. So I'll start off with Councillor James, then Councillor Lester, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Fagan, Councillor Wilding and Councillor Bowes to finish off. So first of all, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I don't wish to make any further comment at this particular stage on the capital element.
Councillor Lester, anything from in your group leader?
Yes, I mean, we note the capital projects that have been put forward. Really pleased to see that there's emphasis about the Hereford Enterprise Zone. Absolutely critical that that gets investment, because that is one of the key areas for economic development that we must help and sustain. But obviously our point of view would be one of the best ways you could help the Hereford Enterprise Zone is to go ahead with the planned, as it was, South Wye Transport package. best to get the infrastructure in there to help investment and
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I know that Councillor Harvey and I have been concerned and still are about close management of capital projects and large expenditures. She's very much on the ball with that, and all that is the comment. As you hope to keep up the good work, make sure we get value for money. Thank you.
Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's really good to have an emphasis on project management, and I feel that that is going to sort of do us many favors in making sure that we can actually deliver these projects. Also, that potentially we may need to have projects oven ready, because I suspect that over the coming couple of years there may suddenly appear grants that we need to bid for in a very short time scale. I also just wanted to welcome the fact that the climate and ecological impacts of projects are now being prioritized within that, within the project schemes, and also welcome the encouragement to work with partners, because we just cannot deliver these sorts of projects on our own in Herefordshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilding.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any further comment other than just to reinforce what Councillor Fagan just said there about the climate and ecology.
Thank you. And Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Leader. We're very supportive of the recommendations, particularly pleased about the investment funding for the 2,500 homes in the county, giving local people the opportunity to stay in the county. So that's very welcome.
Thank you. So I don't know whether any cabinet members wishes to comment on any of those points. I don't know, Councillor Chowns, there's this suggestion that we have some oven ready projects. I don't know whether you want to comment on that.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Fagan, for the point. Yes, we're very much aware that, and indeed hopeful, central government funding may become available. Certainly that happened during this past financial year at very short notice. And indeed, part of the work that we're doing with the Market Town Economic Development Investment Plans, we very much hope to be able to develop a kind of a pitch book, if you like, of capital projects that are, getting to the point where we can submit them and make a really, really good case, because there are many, many opportunities all across our beautiful county, in the city, in the market towns, in the rural areas indeed, and we want to make sure that we get into the best possible position to capitalise on any funding opportunities that may come forward in future. So yeah, very much on our agenda.
Thank you. And I don't know whether Councillor Harvey or Mr Lovegrove wants to comment on project management, just to give Mr Matthews, Councillor Matthews, some reassurances.
Well, Councillor Matthews and I have sat for a long time on audit and governance, and heard a lot of fine words, which, like my granny said, don't butter any parsnips. We've now got a project management office in place. We've got a number of professional project managers who are recruited into it. And those professional project managers are not only leading on managing projects on behalf of directorates, but they're also sharing their knowledge and expertise in helping to transfer their skills into the directorates to also enable directorate staff to deliver projects with additional assurance that will meet both timeframes and also budget requirements.
Thank you. I think I'll now put this to the vote. The recommendation to Cabinet members is as follows, that the following be recommended to Council: to approve the proposed capital programme for 2021-22 attached at Appendix C, and to approve the capital strategy document at Appendix D. I will now ask for Cabinet members to vote on the recommendation. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed.
Thank you, Leader. All non-voting members have left. We have 7 voting members on this poll.
Okay, will you bring up the voting screen?
And they may cast their vote now.
Thank you.
And those have been unanimously approved again, Leader.
Thank you very much. So if the non-voting members can be brought back into the room. So we now move on to the next item, which is the 2021-22 budget setting. This is to agree the draft 2021-22 budget and associated medium-term financial strategy and treasury management strategy for recommendation to Council on the 12th of February. This item begins on page 257 of the agenda pack. And I'll pass this on over also to Councillor Harvey. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce this agenda item also, the 2021-22 budget setting. 2020 didn't turn out like any of us expected. As a council, we did expect pressures on our social care services to continue to increase, and our service transformation programmes were budgeted to continue. However, none of us anticipated the impact that the COVID pandemic would have upon us nationally and also upon us locally. In year, officers have responded swiftly and with creativity and flair to the tsunami of challenges presenting themselves as we have all battled the COVID waves. This 2021 budget sees us needing to recognise and plan for the sustained uplift in service delivery costs and reduction in income sources, which COVID continues to present to us as challenges. Together, these represent over £15 million of additional cost pressures. And thanks to support from central government outlined in the 2021 local government settlement, as set out at paragraph 11 to the report, we are only looking at delivering operational savings of just over 11 million in order to create a funding gap capable of being bridged by the allowable council tax uplift of 4.99%. In setting a 4.99% council tax figure, government has again allowed councils to ring fence a 3% uplift in that tax to go towards the ballooning costs of delivering adult social care services to an ageing population, meaning that the remaining 1.99% of council tax increase is all that is available to cover cost rises across all other council services. The summary provided at paragraph 14 shows the top level budgets, pressures and savings across the main operating areas of the council, which make up the overall net base budget of 161 million, and the sources of funding available to the council, which deliver that figure. The priorities shaping this budget have been influenced by public and stakeholder consultations, and the detailed budget proposals that have been through a detailed examination by all 3 of the council's scrutiny committees. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those involved in that process for the care and consideration given to these budget proposals. The scrutiny committee's comments are to be found at paragraph 50 of this report and are for consideration and approval by Cabinet tonight under recommendation B. Budget pressures being particularly inflated by COVID are outlined in the bar chart shown at paragraph 18, where colleagues can see these additional COVID pressures are particularly acute across adults and children's social care, primarily but not exclusively due to increased residential care costs and the cost of delivering additional care in the home safely during COVID. The in-house savings necessary to offset these pressures are given at paragraph 21 to the report and detailed at Appendix B. This savings programme is challenging, but we are assured is achievable. Delivery plans are already in development with support from the new Programme Management Office, and the overall savings programme will be project managed and supported throughout to minimise the risk to the business. Throughout the development of this budget, consideration has been given to our general duties under the Equalities Act, and whilst we await the formal statutory letter from Mr Lovegrove as our Section 151 officer, I am advised that he is presently content that we have a legal, balanced and risk-managed budget before us tonight. Overall, I know this is not the budget that we would have wished to bring forward to Council, but we remain fortunate, unlike many others, in continuing to be a unitary authority in charge of our own financial destiny. This budget provides significant funding to enable projects to transform the city's travel options to be pursued at pace and to tackle the river pollution hampering economic development. It enables us to press forward with delivering additional affordable homes into communities across the county and to continue to support communities with asset transfers, service hubs, and in finding creative ways to meet local needs at a local level. Investment in road maintenance is being focused on getting the basics right, and we are increasing capital investment in bridge repairs and water management in all its forms. COVID may mean that we must slow the planned pace of progress in some areas of the Council's operation. Top priority will continue to be keeping our staff safe and most vulnerable residents safe. But we shall continue to work enthusiastically with our partners in parishes, in business, in health, in education, in farming, in the creative sector, in the charity and service sectors to make Herefordshire an exemplar of 21st century rural living. Colleagues, thank you to each of you for your close work with officers and your thoughtful consideration of the difficult choices this budget represents. I commend it in its final version to you now and look forward to your comments on the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Okay, so over to Cabinet members for questions, comments. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. This is just a comment, really. As mentioned in the introduction, the 3% increase request for adult social care is a growing concern, and we don't take it lightly. We're all well aware of our ageing population and the cost to provide care and support for these elderly residents. There is no other option but to support this agenda item, and I thank all the officers for their support in it. Thank you.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just want to say thank you to our officers as well. It's been a very difficult and challenging several months trying to balance our budgets, especially in my portfolio area. There's so many challenges we face to keep our budgets as it is, and it's a difficult choice we've had to make. But I hope that the populated but Hereford residents are watching will understand why we've had to make these difficult budget restrictions and may, change our delivery of services, but we will keep as much as we can possibly going through this difficult next 12 to 18 months. And thank you to our officers for doing what they have done in bringing this unique budget report coming together, Councillor Harvey and all the team. It's been a challenging 4 months and well done.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo all the thanks to officers for going through this. This isn't, like Councillor Harvey said, anything that any of us wanted to be looking at. And I know the conversations we've been having and the debates we've all been having as members and officers as to the right things to do. I think that this does bring forward everything that we want to do in protecting the most vulnerable members of our society, but also looking how can we regenerate our city, our county, and I think it does that. I just wanted to draw, if anybody's listening at this late time, just draw people's attention to the till receipt. Many of you will see on social media, you get lots of comments, well, I'm not going to pay my council tax because look at the state of the roads. Have a look at that till receipt. See the small amount of the council tax that goes towards roads in comparison to all of the essential services. And I think that most people are grateful to not have to be a part of. So look at the social care elements in there, look at the ones regarding looked after children, and see how far your money goes nowadays. So have a look at that. I think that I really do commend Councillor Harvey for being able to get to grips with the figures and be able to challenge us when we say we don't want to do anything because we want to keep everything the way that it is, but making sure that we make those difficult decisions because that's what we're here to do.
Thank you. I was quite struck, actually. I looked at last year's papers to see what we said in the last year's budget. And last year, the pressures figure for children's was £700,000. This year it's 6.6 million. So that reflects the extraordinary change, the pressures which are on that particular part, and also reflect a bit on paragraph 20 of this report, where it's saying we have an 8-year. We think it'll take us 8 years to improve things in that budget, like investing ahead of time, getting involved early with children, this kind of thing. So, this is the beginning of the journey, and I'm hopeful that next year we're not going to be looking for another huge amount of savings in order to protect this particular area of our community. But we have to keep on putting pressure, I think, on central government to help us in these areas. It's a long-term plan of ours to reduce the cost in these areas and improve the welfare of people in those areas and intervene early. So perhaps that's a bit of introduction for you, Councillor Norman.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. I echo other members' comments about the work that's been put into this, and thank everyone very much indeed for that huge effort that's produced this. And given, as you've said, Leader, that we spend a huge amount of money in this particular directorate, I'd like to provide a bit of context for the savings that we're proposing for children and families. As you will know, Cabinet, we are transforming children and families services and have high ambitions for children in Herefordshire and the services that work with them and their families. We've introduced a significant transformation programme for early help and safeguarding services, and much has been achieved and recognised externally, including positive feedback from judges, our Essex partners in practice, our Local Government Association Improvement Partner, and our Department for Education Improvement Partner. Cabinet and Scrutiny have recognised the improvement journey and what is being achieved, and are very supportive, for which I thank them very much. We're still at an early stage of a long-term transformation programme, as you've mentioned. It can take local authorities 5 to 8 years to achieve cultural change, with sustained change in practice in how children and families are supported and enabled to achieve change themselves where appropriate. We know that there has been some good improvement, but also some that is not good enough and needs to improve. We also know there's been significant poor practice historically over a number of years, and this is part of what we're working to change. Pleasingly, we've had some recent feedback from children and families on the positive impact of work that has used the new signs of safety approach. We've got some good initiatives taking place: early help, edge of care, investment in legal services, social workers, managers, family support, business support, and so on. We still do have relatively high reliance on agency social workers in some particular teams, but we are being successful in recruiting newly qualified workers and have just been joined recently by 20 who are very enthusiastic about their work, the work they're doing here. Now they do need and will continue to need support as we grow our own. Our single practice model of signs of safety supports practice improvement and also aids retention and recruitment. Early help and edge of care only started in the latter part of last year, but are already leading to reduced numbers coming into care and increased numbers being reunified with their families. Staff are enthusiastic about their work. This was part of the recent feedback from Essex across early help, MASH, assessment, children in care, CP Court and 16+ teams. And they are positive about working for the council, which is really encouraging to hear. The proposed cost avoidance and saving transformation areas are the right things to do for children and for families. That they will generate financial benefits is also great. We are not a council that is solely driven by finance. We are and will be doing what is right to support children and families to be with and remain with their families where it's safe to do so, and can be moved to family or foster care rather than remain in residential. This will take some time. There is also more to do and further steps will need to be considered in future alongside other council initiatives. A number of initiatives in the budget savings proposals were set out to deliver the stretch target across a couple of years in later years rather than the next financial year. That is why some of the ideas and proposals have been rated red or amber during their development, where there is a risk to deliver the full value in the next financial year. We will continue to plan for and deliver these transformational activities. The national situation, the national context is important, and we know that 9 out of 10 local authorities surveyed are saying they will overspend on children's services, and there is a shortage of foster care places nationally, not just locally, and also increased pressure on residential placements, which affects availability and of course price, all adding to the challenges we face. And finally, just a quick comment on scrutiny, who we thank very much for their comments and questions. But they did question how realistic our target of recruiting 30 new foster carers was. And it will be a challenge, we recognise that, but it is based on what we need. And we are taking a number of steps to attract new foster carers, including increasing the allowances and fees paid, as you will know. And we've mentioned already the 100% council tax reduction. And we're also introducing an improved marketing and recruitment project. So this is a very uncertain time, but may also be a time when some people are evaluating whether they would like to become foster carers for the first time. So the increase in fees and allowances to support Herefordshire Council foster carers is an important part of this. And we know that private companies are able to recruit in Herefordshire, so we should be able to do that too. Apologies for a rather lengthy comment, but I think it's really important we recognise this is a lot of money that we're spending, but there are very good reasons for why we need to continue to do that and to support our children and families. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor Chowns.
Thanks. Just a couple of brief points. First of all, like several of my other cabinet colleagues have said, you know, we definitely didn't come into politics to have to find such difficult savings, and it's been a really tough process. And I would like to thank not just my cabinet colleagues, but also officers in all of the parts of the council who've, you know, not only worked so hard, worked their socks off this past year, doing their day jobs, also doing all sorts of extra stuff relating to COVID and the additional pressures, and are also, you know, having to find ways to help the council to save money going forward because of the additional pressures that we face. Really appreciate that very hard work. The other thing I wanted to say is that just this week, you know, I was confronted with the fact that it's often really difficult for the general public to get a grip of the finances, but understandably, because they're so complex. These are such large sums of money. It's really hard to get your head around it. And there are some misconceptions. So for example, about 100 million of what we spend every year, it just passes through us direct to the schools, essentially. You know, we don't have control over that in a sense. So looking at the budget figures, I really want to recommend anybody who's watching in the general public to look at the figures on pages 261 and on page 286, like Councillor Davies was saying, the till receipt, just to kind of understand exactly where the money goes, essentially. You know, our base budget is 160 million roughly. Of that, 60 million for adults, particularly adults with disabilities and adults with other care needs, 37 million for caring for kids, and only 26 million for economy and place, which is where all of the stuff that people see is their kind of, you know, everybody in the county sees their day-to-day bin collection, planning stuff, potholes, all the rest of it, all of that within that really rather small pot in comparison to those other really big things that we all pay towards as taxpayers, not kind of as customers of a service, if you like, but as contributors towards stuff that we can only do together as a county, looking after the most vulnerable in our community. So really just wanted to emphasize that message that we do have to prioritize those duties, and it's right that we do. And I think that given those constraints, we've worked really hard to protect the most important things in our budget, to make sure that our budget is aligned with our priorities in the county plan, and to do our absolute best with every penny that is available to us. Nowhere near enough, central government, I hope you're listening, but to do our very best to spend that money really wisely for everybody's benefit. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Chowns. Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be brief. I just want to thank the officers who worked very hard and had to make some quite difficult decisions about where to find savings. I want to thank the Director, Richard Ball, for the economy and place restructuring that's gone on at a very tough time. We've had a very difficult year. The car parking revenue has been hugely reduced, and we have come to rely on that for all sorts of reasons, for services that we provide, including school and subsidised public transport. So I think this comes back, if I just, I know I hark on about this, but I mean, this comes back once again to the fact that we are simply not being adequately funded by central government. We are not in a situation where we're being fairly funded. We cannot go on like this. COVID makes that, just strips that bare, but we just cannot go on in this situation, you know, with 62 odd million plus the savings we've had to make, you know, a year lost. It's just not possible. Please, tell your MPs what you want them to be fighting for at a national level. We must return to fair funding for social care and for our local authorities.
Thank you for that. I'll move on then, if I may, to the scrutiny chair, starting off with Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. The committee fully acknowledged the immense challenge in setting the budget when there are so many moving parts and known unknowns, and frankly it's difficult at the best of times, but it is particularly challenging in the time of COVID. So even as the Scrutiny Committee settled in to discuss the savings proposals, a recent High Court ruling meant that £330,000 of previously identified savings were called into question, had to be put to one side. It just illustrates the dynamic nature of the times that we're living in. It's very difficult. The Directorate has, over several years now, I think, earned the right to a high degree of credibility in their savings proposals. And although no one is pretending this is easy, the committee did not raise any serious concerns about the ability of the Directorate to deliver on both service and savings. The point was made that this is not about doing less, it's about doing more with less. And very often redesign has led to better outcomes for the service users and a higher degree of satisfaction. And I think it was certainly my belief that it's a restless drive for improvement more than a drive for savings that's the root of this Directorate's decision making. There was a recommendation to bring clarity around the narrative about the 3% adult social care precept, because I think it is quite confusing. I think that's been said before. The narrative around these budgets is difficult. So I'm very pleased that recommendation has been picked up and the work has been commenced to create a sort of public-facing document to explain that, because it is quite important, I think, that people understand what that money does. There was a degree of concern expressed by the committee about the impact of changes on charge payers, and a recommendation was made to phase change, which is recommendation number 4. And I can see that this recommendation has not been accepted, but I do understand the reasons why, in terms of the need to make the savings from a full year implementation of the change, and that change can only happen from a single point in time. So, but I'm sure the committee will be reassured by the fact that there are other measures in place to ensure that there's no undue impact or hardship as a result of these changes. The scrutiny committee had a second bite of the cherry when the replacement proposal for the £320,000 saving was presented last week, and the committee was satisfied that although these are difficult changes to make, the principle of alignment with pension increases was acceptable, that there were sufficient safeguards in place through the minimum income guarantee and personal expense allowance. It was interesting to note in the context of PEA and MIG that the Herefordshire allowance is marginally above the national. The committee were conscious of the potential impact of the proposed changes, asked for detail around the scale of the impact on all those who would be affected. There was some discussion around the presentation of figures, but the committee supported the recommendation as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith-Hurst. Councillor Gandy.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I want to echo the views of my committee that we thank all the officers and staff within the Children and Young People's Directorate for all the hard work that they've done over the last 12 months in what has been a really difficult time, and also for the progress that's been achieved over the last couple of years. However, I received a response to our recommendation 1, which was regarding foster carers, and I was somewhat confused, and I am still somewhat confused. At the time of the reason we made this recommendation is when we held our children's scrutiny meeting and when I attended the general scrutiny meeting, we queried whether the fact that there was an average of 13 foster carers leaving each year due to age or underlying health issues or a change in circumstances, and that in fact we would need to recruit at least 43 new foster carers per year to meet this target. At no time did the portfolio holder or any officer present advise us that the 30 included the replacement of those leaving. When I read the response, I went back to the recording of the meeting of the Children's Scrutiny Committee, and at minute 29, clearly I asked that question, and clearly it is not, I'm not responded to say that it includes the natural wastage of foster carers. Therefore, we had to assume at that time that it did not, and that we were looking for 43 foster carers. Now, if my committee had known, it might have not made that recommendation. I don't know, because obviously we have not had an opportunity as a committee to consider what we have, which is a very, very confusing response to our recommendation. I can only assume one of two things. Either at the time of the scrutiny committee, Children's Scrutiny Committee, and then the General Scrutiny Committee, the portfolio holder and all the other officers from the Children's Directorate were not aware of this fact, and therefore did not think it was included, or perhaps they were asleep, but I don't think so. It was only 29 minutes into the meeting, or they deliberately chose not to tell us, which I don't think is likely, but it does make a bit of a mockery of a scrutiny meeting to consider a budget when a fundamental part of that scrutiny committee's work, when looking at savings, is omitted. Now, if the figure of 30 does include replacement foster carers, then it certainly is not such a difficult target to achieve, and it's not such a stretched target as the impression was given. In 2018-19, we recruited 14 new general foster carers, and in 2019-20, 13 were recruited. So this target is actually for an extra 17 foster carers per year. So I have two questions really, and I know normally you would not expect to have questions here, but why was it not clarified at either children or general scrutiny that the figure included replacement foster carers and that we had misinterpreted the wording? And secondly, in order to ensure that we do not have any misunderstandings in future, are we talking about general foster carers, or are we including kinship foster carers, of which in 2019-20 we recruited 16? And I have to say, I am somewhat, as you can tell, angry about this, and I have got to go back to my committee and explain why we have been misled on this particular item. Thank you.
Councillor Norman, I don't know whether you're able to respond to that now, or Mr. Baird.
I'll respond very briefly, but I think probably Mr. Baird can do it rather better than I can. But as I understand it, the target of 30 is a number overall, not net of retirements. This is my understanding, but perhaps Mr. Baird could make it a bit clearer than me. I'm sure there's absolutely no intention. I'm sure there's no intention to mislead. I'm sure we can sort out any misunderstandings. Mr. Baird.
Yes, and apologies, Chair of Scrutiny and Scrutiny members, if that wasn't clear enough at both meetings. It is the overall figure, and Councillor Gandhi, I'll provide you a written response in detail as well, so that you have that as well as the verbal response.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. That's very helpful. But what I would really want is when we have a future scrutiny meeting to consider the budget, to make sure that we actually are given the actual correct information when we ask the questions, so we aren't put into this position again, because it's a bit of an embarrassment all round, I think.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Gandhi. So move on to Councillor Lester.
Thank you. Yes, we in the Scrutiny Committee, we did at one point focus on this particular issue about the savings plans for children's with regard to foster carers and looked after children, but Councillor Gandhi's made the point there. And at this stage, I'll just focus on the main topics that we covered in scrutiny. We would thank obviously we made some recommendations to the wording of some of the savings proposals, and they've been taken on board. We're thankful of that. Personally, I'm still sceptical that reducing the hours of the waste facilities is going to be a feasible thing. I think the booking system has led to people being deterred. I know Councillor Davis and I disagree about this, but since I've been raising these issues, people have been coming forward to talk to me about the fact that they're disincentivized from using the waste facilities during the fact that they have to book. And so, you know, the idea that they're not being used so much so you can reduce the hours of operation, I don't think is something that's been thought through correctly. But I realise there's a funding issue there, and there's trying to be savings made. With regard to more resilient infrastructure in the face of events like flooding, you will see from the response, it's an extremely comprehensive response, which really highlights just all of the work that the council really is doing to address those infrastructure issues. So I don't think anyone could claim that the council's napping when it's trying to address some of those infrastructure issues. And again, a similar question was asked about, is there enough focus on developing green infrastructure? And again, there's a comprehensive response to that, which highlights all of the work that has been undertaken and will be undertaken. So I don't think anybody could argue that those matters aren't being taken seriously. So the Scrutiny Committee appreciates the answers we've been given there. Councillor Matthews will obviously have his own comments about the car parking charges, because it was him who raised the issue at the scrutiny meeting. He's got his answer that's written there, and it's the answer is noted. You may want to take issue with that, but at least the matter has been teased out and brought to our attention. The view has been considered. There are issues that the Scrutiny Committee covered with regard to budget monitoring, and also with regard to how grant monies are being spent in relation to the pandemic. And I think it's something that the Scrutiny Committee would be wanting to review in their work programme. And so, you know, it's one thing to set a budget, but it's another thing to ensure that those budget proposals are being kept. So I think that will furnish some of the work programme.
You're on mute, David.
Leader, you're mute.
Sorry about that. Councillor Davies, I don't know whether you want to address the waste facilities issue at this stage, or wait till the general discussion later.
Just to say that we're all entitled to our own opinion on this. Mine's based on the evidence that I've got before me, and also all of the letters that have gone in directly to the department. And Richard Board is nodding his head, of people are asking, can we make sure that that booking system remains? So there may be a few people that are saying it, but the majority of people are saying that it works much, much better, including the workforce. So we will agree to disagree on that one.
Right, thank you. So now go on to the group leaders. The order this time is Councillor Lester, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Fagan, Councillor Wilding, Councillor Bowes and Councillor James. So Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for going first. Yes, I understand the comments that Councillor Harvey has made. What a time to be creating a budget, and extremely difficult times. You know, no one would have anticipated COVID coming along and making the challenges that the council faces. And I think on the whole, the council's responded excellently well in coping with the challenges and making sure that the extra funding has been sent out to those businesses, but it's still work to be done, more work to be done. But just to acknowledge that this is an extremely difficult time to be setting a budget, and our group acknowledges that, because we know exactly what it's like to run an administration and to set a budget and to consider all of the issues that you have to grapple with regard to spending. And, you know, I accept also the points that Councillor, you know, you have to understand all of the services that a council does provide. Members of the public have to understand how complicated funding is and all of the commitments. I think, though, that what we will think that the members of the public will question is when you're in a situation where you're asking for 4.99%, and, you know, understand the rationale for that, find it very difficult to square that with writing off reserves to the tune of £11 million in cancelling projects that will only lead to economic development, and paying for reviews that nearly cost £500,000 to be told one thing and then to do another thing. It's going to be difficult for members of the public to square those two issues. And so, you know, there will be a good debate, I am sure, at the meeting of full council on the 12th of February. And I'm sure that all of these issues will be covered. But before that meeting on the 12th of February, I do have 2-3 questions for Mr. Lovegrove. Just briefly, Mr. Lovegrove, if I may. There's just been some talk about freezes on posts for the jobs within the council. Could you just confirm through the leader, is there a freeze on posts at the moment at the council where vacancies arise?
Leader, I confirm that there isn't a freeze on post, but what we have said to managers is to consider all of the options when there is vacancy arises. Can that work be done by either redeployment or done differently, just to go through a normal process of the review and challenge to make sure that we can find the best way of delivering value for money and delivering the services.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question I have is that with the review of the council tax setting, have we had any indication from the police and fire authorities as to what increases they may or may not propose?
I haven't got that information to hand. I think they're going through the same process that this council is doing of setting those. So we will have that information at the March meeting of council where you set the precept. This is the meeting on the 12th to set this council's budget. But if that information becomes available before, I'll make sure that's circulated.
But we haven't had any indication of what those, whether there will be any increases or not.
I don't think we've had any formal notice. I will need to check with my colleagues in the office. There has been quite a lot of discussion with those various precepting bodies about where they're going to put their thing, but I don't think it would be appropriate to speculate on where they think they might be.
Okay, thank you for that. And just finally, I know it's impossible to give a definitive answer, but Mr. Lovegrove, you're the best person to ask, I think. Any thoughts on how much more of a settlement the government may give in the next couple of days?
Thank you. I know, as mentioned in paragraph 11, that we have a draft settlement. Government haven't announced the final details of that settlement. We are being told it'll be sometime after the 4th of February. We're not being told through our informal channels that there will be any extra, but I'm very careful to not promise that, because clearly that's a decision for central government. If the settlement is different, then clearly we will make sure that council is aware of that and where the differences are.
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. Just to reiterate really the point I think that's been made with regard to foster care and the savings plans with regard to the reduction of numbers of children who need care. It's not meant as a criticism, because we fully understand how difficult it is to make those savings in those key areas where the outcome for the child is the thing that drives whether or not there are extra costs or not. But the question we would have is with regard to reducing the numbers of children who need looking after through council services and foster care, etc. Is that a realistic figure? Because, is it that there needs to be more money there because the challenge there takes such a long time to achieve? So that's somewhere where we have some reservations, but that is something that I appreciate you've all borne in mind. Still remains a concern for us. And we look forward to the debate on the 12th of February. Thank you.
Councillor Harrington, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, Leader. I just wanted to come back very briefly on what Councillor Lester had raised in relation to decapitalising. I don't begrudge him taking the opportunity to raise the point, but the reality is that money has been spent. We have to clear out the cupboard. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's been misspent. We were, talking about savings and being judicious with money. £12 million in over a decade, nothing really to show for it, and another 10 years to produce a plan that's going to help our businesses and our residents in Hereford. That just doesn't make sense. And so, yes, we have to make some tough decisions. But if we were committing, we'd be committing at least another 30 or 40 million pounds of revenue to the Western Bypass. We've all done it before, or I have. You buy the Case catalogue denim jacket, it actually doesn't look as good as you thought, but you have to finish paying for the jacket and you decide not to pay for the waistcoat and the jeans. You know, you've got to make judicious decisions.
Thank you. So moving on then to Councillor Matthews.
Well, follow that. I share Councillor Leicester's concern over the waste service reductions. I think we're going to have considerable problems with fly tipping. And I think the cost of the recovery of this will be considerable. So I think that will cancel out any savings, Councillor Davies, you might make with the cutbacks. We'll have to wait and see. Let's hope you've got it right, but I don't think you have. As far as the car parking is concerned, I've got serious concerns about further increases, mainly because of the low paid who have to travel into town for some distance, earn very modest wages, then have to turn around and pay £5, whatever it is per day to park their car. And also for visitors coming in, they can only stand so much. And in my humble opinion, it'll have a detrimental effect on the city centre businesses and there'll be further job losses. So I think that's a serious flaw and that shouldn't have happened. And you should have listened to the advice that came back from the scrutiny and dealt with that. But you've seemed not to, so we'll have to wait and see, because my own view is that we should be making every effort to protect jobs, not to destroy them. I think this will have an adverse effect in that field. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Fagan.
Yes, I mean, first of all, we would just like to say how much we appreciate the effort that's gone into the consultation over this. An extraordinary time to have to try and make budget decisions, and given that the demands for money are up within our local communities and being able to deliver services, and yet government funding is down, and it just leaves us wondering where on earth government thinks we are going to be able to find the money to deliver services. And personally, it makes me furious when I think of some of the money that's been wasted on projects, and possibly, you know, government could do with some good project management skills themselves. We just want to say how much we appreciate the efforts that staff have gone to in trying to find the savings and come up with a budget that can actually deliver what we need to deliver for the residents of Herefordshire.
Thank you. Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'll echo everything that other people have said about thanking staff and members who have worked so tirelessly to bring this budget together. It's obviously very difficult. As a member of the General Scrutiny Committee, I've had a chance to say a few things about it already, and I'm happy to see some of the answers. I'd just like to reinforce my feeling that the climate and ecological emergency needs to be given even greater focus. I know it's really difficult, but you know, it's got to be done. I'd also like to reinforce my support for the progress that's being suggested for the transport measures, and that they should be moved forward as quickly as possible, because I think this is going to make a massive difference to this administration. And lastly, back to communication. I think if we're going to get this across, we do need to communicate it better. While I do like the till receipt thing, I think it tends to lose a lot of the large figures within it. It's very dense and you lose the figures. And I wonder whether alongside it we could have, is it called a word map, where the things that get the most money actually appear bigger. So you have schools, and then you have children in care and adults in care, and then you have roads, little roads, and then you have libraries, poor little libraries, just that people can see the massive differences in how our funds are spent. Because I think people just seem to think that we spend it all on a slap up Sunday lunch for ourselves, and it would be good to try and get that message over better. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding, for waking us all up and bringing some animation to the whole thing. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Leader. As Vice Chair of Scrutiny, I think most of the councillors in the meeting had very positive feedback on the booking system at the recycling centre. And personally, I'd rather have reduced hours as a better option than closing one of the sites. So that was just something I'd like to comment on. In terms of our group, I think we'd like to thank the officers and Councillor Harvey for all their hard work. We completely acknowledge that difficult choices have had to be made, and we need to ensure that we support our families, our ageing population and all our residents in Herefordshire. I would also echo Councillor Harrington's comments. We need central government to give us some fair funding.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard that so many times. We need to get the government to give us fair funding. Well, every council in the country is saying that at the moment. We have to live with where we are. This is not the venue now for the full debate as we will have on the 12th. I have to say, I wish you well in trying to explain to the general public how you're going to put up the council tax by 5%, and yet you're going to tip 12 millions, well, between 12 and 17 millions, because there are other implications, down the drain of now by decapitalizing the capital to revenue, how you can tip that down the drain and then say that you're making a very, very good job of it. The public just won't wash it.
Thank you, Councillor James. Do you want to respond to that, Councillor Harrington or Councillor Harvey?
Well,
Sorry, I was struggling to find my button in anger, but I can't reiterate the point more clearly. The money has been misspent. What do you propose we do? And I don't know where you've got the 17 million figure for. I'd love to talk to you about that as early as possible. It's easy to make these points, but we've got to make hard decisions.
Yeah, as Councillor Harrington said, this money has been spent. We've got two projects here. One simply cannot be delivered. The money isn't there for it. And the other one doesn't represent good value for money, and it isn't a sustainable solution, and it will not address the city's traffic troubles in the way that a second city bridge will. It's fine sitting in a car on the top of the hill in Kington making these kind of statements, but all the time the public is being misled by these kind of remarks, Councillor James. Of course they're not going to understand the reality of the situation, and you would serve your community and Herefordshire far better as an elder statesman of this council, instead of making cheap political points from the top of your hill, actually talking the truth about this, and also reading the background papers that deliver the evidence to substantiate what we're actually having to deal with here.
Chair, decapitalizing capital and putting in revenue has a serious implication for the revenue income of the council. I heard at the previous cabinet meeting.
Silly, this is nonsense you're speaking.
It is just as if you suddenly, instead of your mortgage, somebody said, well, I'm going to pay back £10,000 immediately out of my current income. And that has serious implications.
Well, we're presented with an impossible situation. The only thing we can do in financial terms to address the impasse that we have inherited is to actually use some of those reserves to decapitalise money that has already been spent. We're not spending new money, we're dealing with money that was spent by the last administration.
I think we'll leave it at that at this time. So any other observations anybody on the Cabinet has in connection with points made by any of the group leaders? Okay. Well, I think we'll put this motion to the vote. I can find so the. The recommendation is that A, the following be recommended to Council. A, the Council tax base of 68,355.22 Band D equivalents. B, an increase in core Council tax in 2021-22 of 1.99%. C, an additional precept in respect of adult social care costs of 3% applied to Council tax in 2021-22, resulting in a total Council tax increase of 4.99%, increasing the Band D charge from £1,573.77 to £1,652.30 for Herefordshire Council in 2021-22. D, the balanced 21-22 revenue budget proposal totaling £161 million, subject to any amendments approved at the meeting, specifically the net spending limits for each directorate as at Appendix C. E, delegation to the Section 151 officer of the power to make necessary changes to the budget arising from any variations in central government funding allocations via general reserves. F, the medium-term financial strategy, MTFS 2021-24 at Appendix A be approved. G, the Treasury Management Strategy at Appendix D be approved. And H, that the growth bid to fund an Armed Forces Covenant Support Officer attached as Appendix H be approved. And B, the responses to Scrutiny Committee's recommendations as provided in paragraph 50 be approved. I will now ask that Cabinet members to vote on the recommendations. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed.
Okay, Leader, we have 8 voting members.
Thank you. Please bring up the voting screen.
And they may cast their vote.
Cabinet members, please then cast their vote for, against, or abstain.
Leader, those have been unanimously accepted.
Thank you. If you could bring the non-voting members back in, that would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was duly passed. We look forward to the debate in February. Now, item 7 is a recommendation for potential sites to progress affordable housing delivery in Herefordshire. I think we'll keep going if that's all right with everybody. We might just see how we get on with this one. So the papers seek agreement to proceed with the outline feasibility of an initial number of select council-owned sites and any suitable sites in third-party ownership identified across the county in order to progress the pipeline of suitable sites. This item begins on page 67 of the agenda pack. And I'll pass straight over to Councillor Tyler, Cabinet Member Housing, Regulatory Services and Community Safety.
Thank you, Leader. Welcome, members. I'm going to introduce the report for the Cabinet regarding the significant decisions that we've been making over the last 3 months with the lead of our developing generally affordable housing across the county, aiming to establish at least 2,500 new homes in the next 10 years. As set out in our county plan, the critical need for sustainable, affordable, high-quality homes is essential to meet the needs of our local residents. We need to improve their quality of life and let them live in homes that meet zero carbon targets to help key issues such as reducing fuel poverty. Council's decision to develop these homes will have a significant positive impact for local people in years to come. However, to meet this ambition, we need to establish a significant pipeline of sites, both in the short term and in the longer term, to meet our target. As a first step, the decision that the Cabinet are due to consider tonight proposes that we initially commission some high-level technical analysis of a number of council-owned sites to review any opportunities and/or constraints for possibly establishing affordable housing, or better utilised for other priority uses. The decision paper also proposes we seek to identify other third-party sites that may be suitable for affordable housing across Herefordshire. The term of third parties can consider the purchase of properties and land. Publishing the list of council sites set in the Appendix 1, which has been appended this evening, updated, will be part of this review, has understandably generated some questions and initial concerns about suitability of some of these locations for housing development. However, I must state at this stage, the decision we are considering is to only undertake a review of the potential for development in deciding which may or may not be suitable for further investigation. Those sites are identified for possible development will be subject to detailed design and the plan approval thereafter. Prior to considering this paper tonight, I need to flag up one correction to the list of published sites. Unfortunately, the Hereford Fire Station had been mistakenly included in the list. We've had to remove this because it is not owned by council. The appendix has been amended and superseded this evening before the committee. We apologise for any unintended concern to Councillor Roger Phillips and the Hereford and Worcester Fire Service for this error that may have been caused. So the recommendation for tonight is to approve the pipeline of sites that has been identified in Appendix 1. We will look at the feasibility analysis of the sites, and the NG will look at each site for 1 week and then analyse whether it is worthy of going forward for future development. If it's deemed not appropriate, they will move on to the next site. And this way, hopefully, you can bring the paper before Cabinet, maybe before July, hopefully June, to sort of see how we can move this development sort of sites quicker. I hand over to officers now at this present time to see if they would like to add anything further and open up for questions, Leader. Many thanks.
I think the officer is Nigel Thomas.
And yes, and Roger Allenby.
And Roger Allenby, thank you. Do you have any comments at all?
Thank you, Lena. Hayley Crane's also on to answer questions. I think you've said it out very well, Councillor Tyler. So you've previously agreed the funding to do this study. This is to agree the list that we'll look at, or start to look at, and that week that Councillor Tyler helpfully mentioned is a range of technical studies looking at site massing, access, planning, and what are the constraints and opportunities of each of those sites, so as we can identify the pipeline we need to start to develop the affordable housing target.
Thank you. Any questions for Cabinet members? Observations? Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I'd just like to check. I mean, clearly that this list here represents the sites in the council's ownership, public ownership, which are of a sufficient size to have the possibility of taking housing. And presumably this is a process by which we rule them in or out as being appropriate, and if I understood Mr. Allenby correctly, also understanding what the infrastructure requirements and additional investments would need to be in order to make them deliverable and sustainable as housing sites. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor Harvey. Yes, it's to identify whether they would be suitable for affordable housing on those terms in creating that pipeline.
Okay, so there's no assumption at this stage that any or all of them are appropriate to come forward, but we're just going through the process of looking at the large land blocks that are in council ownership.
That's right, absolutely right, and obviously some of these sites have the potential for other uses as well in creating the balance of housing, economy, and other things that you would like to see as part of the county plan across the county. So this is simply the first stage of ruling some of them in or out for the possibility of affordable housing. It's not at all making a decision to build affordable housing on these sites.
Okay, well, you know, in that case, I'm very supportive of us doing this kind of high level review at the earliest stage. I think it's important to understand what the opportunities and the barriers are to some of these land holdings and what use they could be put to. They all are in public ownership, and as a council they all have a cost of ownership as well. So I think, you know, with my finance hat on, I'm keen to understand what the potential is for them to deliver value to the public in the way that we make best use of them, and also to home in quickly on ones that are showing potential, and to rule out equally quickly ones that, for, you know, whatever reason, may not be suitable to go any further forward.
Yes, Councillor Harvey, that will be our intention. As pointed out, NG will consider the analysis over 1 week, and if within the first or the second day that there is no feasibility here to be delivering affordable units because of the constraints on the site, we will move to the next option of the next site, and then we will report back in Cabinet in June or July. So we will not be exploring huge constraints if it's just deemed not viable for the council.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Hi, sorry, two things at once. I suppose this is a question slightly towards Councillor Harrington. Can't even say his name now. Councillor Harrington, around specifically the Grafton sites that are named on here. So we'll all be aware, it doesn't need hammering home, that there are one of the proposals is to remove the Southwide Transport Package, and in order for some of those housing sites to come forward, we would expect some kind of infrastructure to allow that to happen. Can you confirm what that might be, and whether or not we're looking at that at the moment, just for me to understand how they're in the list?
Yes, certainly. There's two elements, I think, there, Councillor Davies. The first one is that if housing was to progress on these sites, we would certainly have to look at putting in some infrastructure, and that would, that would be some road access, and it would also be improves, cycling and walking provision, because the sites so close to town should be really using the very best active travel measures in their design. The other point that I think is important for people like councillors like yourself is that we need to look at access in the South Wye. We need to look at access in South Herefordshire. And I think that if we were to bring forward sites here, we would look at upgrading roads in the surrounding area, existing roads, which we can make relatively minor changes to, well, not minor, but relatively cost-effective changes to allow that access from the south.
Thanks for that, Councillor Harrington. And the other question is probably for the officers, which is, can you confirm that the teams that are looking at this have environmental experts on board, so that we're able to identify that in those high-level plans? Councillor Tyler's nodding, so she might be able to answer that one.
Yes, Councillor Davis. We've just appointed John Christophers, who is an environmental consultant, who will be looking at our aspirations of delivering zero carbon targets for affordable housing as well. So we give high quality homes for our residents and to enjoy for in long-term use as well. So yes, we have employed John Costa-Christophers to do that sort of work for us, to work alongside our NG and ARC as well. Thank you.
I think that's me, Leader, isn't it? Did I see your...
Yes, you can read my lips.
I was trying. Yeah, thank you. As a ward member for a potential 2 sites from this feasibility study, I just wanted to remind the officers that these sites were proposed when they were considering the Western Bypass. So I think we need to revisit that before any thoughts have gone too far. It's also firmly rejected for the development in the Birkhill NDP for a range of significant reasons. On a positive note, we've already built or building 44 affordable houses in Birkhill. At the moment, it's just sort of in progress, and it's going well. So we are supporting the affordable housing, but it's got to be in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else with any comments? Not at the moment. So I will pass to group leaders. I'm pretty sure this hasn't gone to scrutiny. So I'll go to group leaders and start with Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, we support the principle of affordable homes. We badly need those, no problem with that. But I'm glad this is only a feasibility study, because when you look at the bus station, I think it would be absolutely suicidal to put affordable homes on there. You've got the hospital next door, which is going to have to expand in a few years' time because of the pressures and because the population rising quite swiftly within the county. They'll have to use up their car parking. We now got no car parks. The Rockfield Road's gone. Merton Meadow will soon be gone. So we'll have no car parks at all at that end. You'll have nurses coming off. I know it's going on a long time. It won't happen overnight. But you'll have nurses coming off shifts at 10 o'clock at night and having to walk through the burial ground and all sorts of unsuitable routes to get back to where they've parked their car. So I would strongly urge you to look very careful at that and to do what we've always said it would do and put a multi-story car park on there, for one floor for the medical staff to give them a bit of relief, and the rest for visitors and help to curtail the costs of the hospital car parks. I think it would be absolutely totally wrong to develop this site with affordable housing when a multi-story car park would be far more and would return a sound profit. So I strongly urge you, Councillor Tyler, to look very, very careful at that particular item. And as I said, like, you know, it's the issue of the Grafton issue has already been dealt with, so I'll leave that. But this one I feel extremely strongly about, and I think it'd be totally wrong, and you wouldn't get a very warm welcome from the public over that. Thank you.
Councillor Tyler, do you want to respond to that, or Mr. Allenby?
Yes, can I respond to that, Leader? Yes, thank you for highlighting the bus station, Councillor Matthews. It was an established site for the development of a multi-storey car park as well as key worker accommodation. We will be looking at this site in a holistic approach and to make sure that we will look at opportunities for key workers as well as car parking and whether affordable homes can be utilised on this site as well. So I do take your points as you've raised, and we will consider this site with caution to make sure that we don't lose a valuable parking for key workers, as you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. I feel a bit better now, and I know you've got, you know, the thought of the medical staff and the public generally.
Yes, I have.
Make sure you deal with that one right. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Fagan, then Councillor Wilding, Councillor Bowes, Councillor James, and then Councillor Lester. So Councillor Fagan next.
Yeah, thank you. We really welcome this, how fast the council is moving forward on this affordable housing pledge, and so it's fantastic news for the county, for people who are looking for somewhere to live. It's also fantastic news for the environment, and in terms of making these houses zero carbon. I think Herefordshire could be a sort of flagship council for this kind of development, and I hope that the ecological crisis will also be sort of kept in mind when we're looking at developing these houses, and how whatever site is used, that we do make sure that nature recovery networks are included in that where possible. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wilding.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we all want to see more of these houses, so we obviously support that, and I welcome the news that you're appointing John Christophers to take, a part in developing these plans, and also I see there's Model Farm in Ross-on-Wye in the list. And I was wondering, in places like that, will you be considering whether there are other things besides houses on the site? You know, are there going to be amenities such as health centre or stuff like that in these sites? Is that going to be part of the review? Thanks.
Councillor Tyler, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilding. As I've already stated in my opening statement, the feasibility will look at other opportunities as well, not just affordable housing. So if it's deemed that affordable housing can't be delivered, then this feasibility study will consider other opportunities that we may be able to bring forward on any of the council-owned sites. So we are looking at those situations as well from this feasibility study to help. Hope that helps your question.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes.
We desperately need sustainable and affordable housing for local people, so we fully support the proposal to carry out the high-level investigations on sites and possible options for their future use.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Oh, I am unmuted, sorry. Yes, generally supported. I just caution against, too much expenditure on consultants. That's the curse. I do ask you to look at what happened at the Ledbury Road Rose Gardens, and how what was supposed to be a very affordable scheme ultimately ended up as a very expensive scheme, putting in substantial public money. Do that. But I do agree with what Councillor Matthews said about the bus station. I've got a family member who was medical in the hospital, and there are nurses and hospital people having to walk in the night to the multi-storey car park in Widemarsh Street. So be careful that you don't. They're looking forward to having a more accessible way in which they can get access their work at the hospital. So please be careful.
Thank you. Councillor Lester.
Thank you. Yes, I just think the report may have set a few hairs racing by making the statement sites immediately available. I think I know it's only a review or a proposed report that's going to look into the matter, but I think perhaps it should have said something like sites within the ownership of the council, because it gives the impression that you're going to do these things anyway, straight away, without any further investigation. And obviously you've included land that isn't owned by the council, but I appreciate the comments that Councillor Tyler has made to clarify that situation. I'm sure it came as a surprise to the fire authority, but I think the points we would make generally as a group is that yes, we're pro affordable housing. That is, we're always going to be in favour of that, and to bring about more affordable housing is obviously going to be beneficial to Herefordshire. So we support that, and we also support the idea of working with our development partners to achieve this goal. But we part company, I think, when it could be the possibility that the council ends up having to provide all of this housing, and the extra burden that will create on the council, we just don't think is something that's going to be viable long term. Yes, facilitate those houses being built. Yes, use our land to create them, but to actually be responsible for them, we think is a step too far. So I think we meet you halfway on this one. But the one thing I have to say, and I accept that this is only a review of the possible options, but it does seem inconsistent that the majority of housing that you're looking at putting in Grafton is exactly where you're proposing to cancel a major infrastructure project that would no doubt help facilitate that. And it does seem to be very inconsistent. I understand the points about having to look into the infrastructure, but you're just on the verge of wanting to cancel one project that would greatly help something that you're entertaining doing. So it just does, I have to say, strike us as being inconsistent in the thinking on the matter. And the point I would just make really is that council should be in the business of ensuring that that infrastructure is there, and there are house builders that can be utilised to achieve those goals with development partners. But I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. I have a hand up from Councillor Ginman.
Yeah, just one brief thought. This is an early stage paper and one appreciates the point. The last year with the COVID effect has meant the migration of labour has been markedly reduced. The projections that were there previously on growth of population, which a lot of this has been based around, I would imagine are all going to have to be revised and reconsidered. The number of people made unemployed is going to have an effect on migration of labour. So I presume that that is going to have to be part of any consideration with regard to any future building and requirements.
Any other observations? Or shall I put this to the vote? Okay.
Can I just have a...
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Sorry, Leader. I've taken on all the points that members have outlined this evening. You know, in terms of Grafton site, we have to seriously look at this site, whether it is feasible, but we're identifying our council-owned sites, as you've rightly said, Councillor Lester. You know, we know there are difficulties on the site, but I would like to just reiterate, this is a feasibility study at this present time. We will look at what can be done. We know there's significant infrastructure on these sites as well that's already been highlighted by the ward member to me, but I will go away and we will consider all these options through what is brought back by NG, and this will be reported back to Cabinet back in hopefully June or July, and that's when the debate can be brought forward as to what is reasonable and what is viable for Herefordshire Council and our residents to have generally affordable homes in Herefordshire, and this is the whole reason why it's being delivered by our county plan. So but I do take on all the points you have said. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll put this recommendation to the vote then, if I may. So the recommendation is that Cabinet agrees to proceed with the outlined feasibility work for net zero carbon affordable housing, the initial selected council-owned sites and any other sites in third-party ownership that may be available across the county. Prioritise to meet the demands based on market needs. The one amendment is recorded in the amended appendix, I think, taking out.
Yes, it is, Leader, yes.
Yeah. So I will now ask Cabinet members to vote on the recommendation. Please can non-voting members be moved, which has already happened. So if the clerk could just confirm the number of voting members, I'd be grateful.
Leader, that we have 8 voting members and they may cast their vote now.
Thank you.
And those have been unanimously accepted, Leader.
Thank you very much. Well, that was duly passed. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. It's not quite 8:30 yet, so I think that's quite good. Some difficult issues, and look forward to further debate on some of them. Thank you very much. So if you could bring the recording to an end, Jen, I'd be grateful.